So this is the second lecture on organization, and this one will focus on outlining in terms of organizing the entire structure of your paper, as well as kind of some basic and paragraphing. So, the important thing to remember is if you don't know where you're going with your writing, you're not going to be able to expect anyone else to. I know a lot of students like to say, well, I'm going to sit down and I'm just going to see what comes out. But it's really important, especially with a big literature review where you're trying to incorporate a lot of information, that you have a plan for what you're going to do. And I will tell you, the more effort you put into this stage to outlining and planning and figuring out where you're going to use your sources, the easier it is to actually sit down and write. So if you put all the effort in here, you potentially could have every paragraph of your paper outlined. And so all you need to do is write what you've planned to write. So keep that in mind. I encourage you to put the effort in now so that you have an easier time when you go to actually sit down and do your writing. Okay, so when we talk about organization, there's a couple of levels of organization that we need to think about. Global organization is kind of the overall organization of your main points. So just what order you're going to address things in. Sectional organization has to do with the organization of the section. So first the introduction, and then, are you going to cover topic A first or topic B first? And then local has to do with your organization of your paragraphs and your sentences. Your assignment for this week will really focus on kind of the global and the sectional portions, but I'll talk a little bit about local and we'll cover that more later. So there's a couple of different ways you can go about organizing your paper. An idea map is kind of a neat one. I think it's maybe less useful for getting the details down and preparing you to write, but it's a really good starting point if you're you've got a bunch of ideas and you haven't figured out how they go together. So this is an example of an idea map, and you're just kind of throwing down phrases or topics that you've covered and trying to figure out how they connect. An outline is really useful because it's more like paragraph form. It's basically kind of laying out how your ideas are going to go together. It's easier to include your sources, and you can start out an outline with broad categories and then figure out where your evidence fits. Okay, so again, an outline should be the basic structure of your paper. It's the main ideas and paragraphs in your essay, but within an outline, you can actually get very specific and even outline down to the sentence or paragraph level. And so you want to start out with the basic categories, your main ideas, but then you want to drill down to more specific paragraphs. And so you can get down to what's the main idea of this paragraph? What do I want to say in here? How does the main idea address my thesis? So in this paper, every piece of evidence you present should be related back to your thesis at the end of the paragraph. And so you want to constantly be thinking about that as you're listing your topics and listing the points that you're planning to make. How does it relate back to my thesis? How does it strengthen my argument? And very important for this week's assignment, you want to make sure you have evidence supporting this idea. So thinking about outlining can help you realize, do I need more evidence for this idea? Is this unrelated to my main topic? Do I have enough evidence here? Do I need to add a subtopic because I have so much evidence? If you have a hard time answering these questions about a paragraph or a section, you might want to kind of think about rewriting the topic sentence or reorganizing your paper. Okay, so this is just an example of an outline that I've done for a paper that we actually ended up getting published a few years ago now. And kind of in the very beginning of an outline, what I do is I think about my thesis and I think about the subpoints that I want to make. So in this case, it was a study looking about attitudes and beliefs about breast cancer and how that influenced women's likelihood to get a mammogram. And in particular, I looked at women's perceptions of risk, their expected prognosis, what they thought it would look like if they were to get breast cancer, and then the benefits versus barriers to getting mammograms. But this on its own is not enough, right? Just looking at this, I wouldn't be able to write a paper. This is just a list of the sections that I might have. So I need to figure out how the evidence I have fits into these sections and these paragraphs. So again, this is the outline from the actual paper I wrote. here I have kind of very clearly laid out the arguments I'm going to make in each section, and even really down to the paragraph, right? So I've got my introduction, some of the key stats that I want to include. Note that there are citations for these statistics. So I know where the evidence is coming from. I've got my thesis here very clearly laid out. So my first section is done. I've laid out kind of the details of this model that I'm using, and again, have the citation for it, and have laid out point by point how I'm going to describe it. And then here in section 3, I've got my information about perceived susceptibility, and I have a couple of different points. Note that I have different citations for each point, and I've really managed to kind of combine my literature together in here. This is another page, same thing, down to my conclusion. So when I sit down to write this paper, I know exactly what I'm going to say. And so it's very easy to sit down and write when you say, oh, I might need to check back on this study, but I did talk about, I want to say something about the benefits, and here's a study that addresses this. Oh, I've got a couple of studies on barriers. Here are the pros and cons. I have them laid out. And so this is really important. So your assignment for this week, and I'll go over it in just a minute, is going to be making an outline like this for your paper. But also it's important to have an idea of kind of the basic layout and basic structure of your essay. So an essay has a beginning, middle, and end. This seems obvious, but often students are missing these in their essays. So the beginning gives the reader direction, so the reader knows what to expect and look for. It kind of leads into broadly the subject and culminates in your thesis. Your middle is where most of your arguments are, and then your end lets the reader know that they've arrived, reminds them of what they've learned, and kind of drives the point home. A paragraph, like an essay, needs a beginning, middle, and an end. And so you have in a paragraph of the beginning and end are each one sentence. So your topic sentence is the paragraph's main point. This is a small thesis in essentially your paragraph should be a mini essay. So your topic sentence should let the reader know what the paragraph will be about. It should be broad enough to cover the entire paragraph. So again, remember that your topic sentence should be a thesis statement for the paragraph. You also need a hook in your topic sentence. So either repeating a word or tying in a thought or a transition word from the previous paragraph. The middle sentences in a paragraph fill in the details. So once you've got the topic sentence, fill it in, examples, discussions of specific studies, making sure that it's coherent and well organized still. And then your end sentence in the paragraph finishes it up, wraps it up, ends with a big punch, restates your argument for the paragraph, but it also, very importantly, ties that argument back to your thesis statement. Why is this paragraph relevant to the overall big picture of the paper? Okay, so this is an opportunity for you to try it yourself. So you can pause this video, and what I'd like you to do is write a 4 to 6 sentence paragraph about something. I don't care what it is, a fun experience, your favorite food, your pets, why you love online learning. But what I want you to do is try to make sure that you have a topic sentence that's broad enough to cover your entire paragraph, that you fill it in with relative details or supporting evidence, and then you write a concluding sentence that wraps it up and makes your point. Okay. Now, sometimes your paragraphs will look different depending on the purpose or the place that they go in your paper. So your beginning paragraph should be a funnel. Okay, so you start with an open invitation, kind of a broad discussion of the topic, and you need to get kind of more and more specific until the last sentence of your first paragraph should be your thesis statement. If you're not sure where to start and are kind of struggling, one of the best things you can do is take one word from your thesis statement and say something about it. Okay, that's a very opening starting point. And then 3 to 4 sentences later, you should end with your thesis. Middle paragraphs, again, remember they should be mini essays. They should have a beginning, middle, and an end. They should flow smoothly and cover everything that is mentioned in the topic sentence. So your topic sentence, again, should be broad enough to cover everything, and everything mentioned in it should be covered. It should be well developed with details and examples and full explanations. And don't forget transitions, right? So you need to hook the new paragraph to the previous one, and also you might need transitions within your middle paragraphs. And then end paragraphs, so in your entire paper, end paragraphs are about what you want the reader to take away. So it should reassert your thesis. The first sentence should basically be rephrasing your thesis and then summarize with some take-home points. So your entire essay should look like this, where you start broad, you get more specific to your thesis. The body of your sentence or the body of your essay should be filling out those details. You start your concluding paragraph with your thesis and then work your way out. So when we think about how to prepare this for an outline, your worksheet for this week will help with that. So this is the organizing ideas part 2. So the next step, go back to what you did last week and make sure you look at your synthesizing sources table. But your next step is to create this detailed outline. So for this assignment, it needs to be at least 2 pages. Remember to use last week's worksheet. You need to have the introduction covering background information and with a clear thesis statement. The body of your paper demonstrates your understanding of the current literature review by organizing it around your theme. So you picked out your themes last week. You should have some clear themes. Now, one thing I want to know, and I've already talked about this, is your you will use your sources in multiple places. If you're doing it right, you're going to be integrating your sources and you may use them in multiple different places. And so you want to synthesize the ideas. So again, theme 1 shouldn't be, here's the summary of source 2, here's the summary of source 5, and here's the summary of source 3. Instead, you're going to talk about the ideas from them as they relate. So again, if you go back to the example from last week, if we're talking about emotional well-being and the college transition, I might talk about the 3 studies that talked about college transition and loneliness. I'm going to talk about a couple of the different studies and cite a couple of studies that looked at depression and so on. So you want to synthesize or combine them. You'll also note that you'll cite, you're going to cite a study in multiple places, different information, different relevant information. And then you also need to make sure to have a conclusion. So I've given you a template to kind of give you a starting point using the themes in part 1 of this worksheet. The bolded items in this template are required. You should edit the topics and terms with things that are appropriate for your paper, right? So you need to put your paper topic. You need to have your thesis statement. Section 1 should be the name of the actual topic. Okay, so don't name it section 1, name it the college transition and well-being, or whatever your section topics are. Also, so that you know where your information is coming from, your citations should be used throughout, as in the example in the PowerPoint, and should be in APA format, as you would cite it in the text of the paper, so the authors and year. You can and should add more topics and subsections as needed. This is just to give you a basic starting point. And then you'll need your conclusions, reiterate your thesis, bigger picture. Okay, and so that is your assignment for the week.